103.5 WEZL on the web at WEZL.com. That is the latest from Toby Keith. That is The American Ride. And a fella who has been on The American Ride.
Or some kind of ride.
Some kind of ride for the last 6 months. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Mark Sanford is with us this morning. Mark, good to have you back.
Pleasure to be
Good to have you back. And this is something Rick and I and Gary have talked about this, about, well, what do you say to Mark Sanford if he ever comes by the studio now? I mean, what? Yeah. And you and I talked about this on the way in, and on a personal level, I am really sorry that all this stuff happened. I really am. I've been a big supporter from day one of your philosophy and you as a man and everything else. And
well, let's say the obvious there, which is, you can say it ad nauseum, and a lot of folks have said, look, quit apologizing. But, if I offended my brother, my sister, my cousin, my aunt, my uncle, if you let them down, you'd apologize. And so, not only would I apologize to y'all, but I'd apologize to a lot of listeners out there who I let down. I think, though, that the question, and this is the part that gets me up, keeps me going in the job, is pushing it ahead as best I can, which is the question of life is not, are we going to fall down once or twice in life, and perhaps we won't fall down at the epic level that I did, but how do we get back up?
Yeah. And,
this process of getting back up, this process of repentance and redemption, hope and faith and growth, and all those different things that, grandmom or grandpa used to tell us about, I think is part of the odyssey that I've been on. And it's an amazing experience in terms of personal growth. But I think the more important, a lot of people, that's my life, and you figure it out.
Right.
The more important part that I think people care about on a daily basis, I think, are two things. One, even if I was a failure on the moral front, was a failure on the spending front? And the answer is unequivocally no. There's a whole lot more to be told behind the headlines that different folks have rung up over the last couple months. One. And two, this bigger question, not where do I go from here, where's the legislature go from here, but where do we go as South Carolinians? And I think that, oddly enough, and this is what keeps me here, because I would have packed it up and gone to that farm in Beaufort County a long time ago if I didn't believe this was the case. Oddly enough, I think we have a real opportunity as South Carolinians to make some changes that have been pushing on for 6.5 years that we weren't able to push over the top, because you may remember, and I want you all to think back to what you were hearing. A lot of folks would say, I'd give them that victory on restructuring or changing the way that this works or that works, but that guy's running for president, and I ain't about to give him another victory so that he gets another feather in his cap.
Absolutely.
And so I think that, oddly enough, the silver lining to these gray clouds that I threw onto the floor could well be that for the first time in I don't know how many years, we could actually have a conversation about the issue itself, on restructuring, on spending limits, a number of things, rather than about where's Mark going next and politically, because the answer is nowhere. Yeah. It's clear that my political future is over. Now, can we discuss these issues here during this last term that I have in office?
One thing, and we were just talking about this earlier this morning, we've got an election cycle coming up, and we've got just about every major office holder in this state running for your office or an office. And something I've always just not been happy about with our system is that somebody who makes a contract with me to take care of an office for me if I vote for them turns around halfway through it and says, you know what, I'm going to run for something else, and then they don't do their job for me that I voted for. I really don't like that, but it's part of the process. Now we're in a situation where you are facing a legislature that is absolutely bound and determined, it seems, to find you a way out of Columbia. Mm-hmm. We're facing an election cycle where everybody's going to be running for office and not paying attention to what's going on in this state. And it concerns me, and I'm hoping you can give me some light in the clouds here, that we're not going to get anything done in the next 18 months. Can you work, and will the legislature work with you? Can you work with them to get some of this unemployment, some of these unemployment problems and the business problems and the money problems of this state? Can anything happen in the next 18 months?
Well, on the money problems, no. I mean, this is where, again, going back to old scripts, as a broken record for I don't know how many years saying, look, you can't grow government faster than the underlying economy and have good things happen. I mean, a lot of people fussed at me, said I was fighting against the stimulus because I wanted to run for president. I said, give me a break. If you looked at what I was talking about when I first ran for Congress 15 years ago, I was talking about the exact same stuff. This is not new stuff. So I think that, we're still in a bit of a pickle with regard to spending. It's going to take some time to get out of it because we just flat out got ahead of ourselves with regard to spending. Government grew by about, a little over $2 billion. It's B with a billion over the last couple of years, and there's some working out of that. So there's no immediate quick fix answer with regard to spending.
No matter who's at the helm.
No matter who's at the helm.
Right.
And, but, I think that, again, this is what has kept me here as opposed to packing in and heading down to that farm to hide out and never look at another television camera again, which would be an exciting prospect, can we take all this political energy that's in the room and focus it on some changes that would actually make a difference in people's lives? So, for the first time in my life, when I walk into a Rotary in some very quiet corner of South Carolina, there's somewhere between 3 and 5 television cameras going in with me. I did a thing in Swansea, out in the middle of really sort of the countryside outside of Columbia yesterday, and there were 3 television cameras there, and a 4th one arrived late. I mean, never before in my life have I had that kind of follow-around, if you want to call it that, with regard to media. And the question I always ask the audience I'm talking to is, if every one of us chose to email a friend, write a letter, call a legislator on just a couple of these things, and they can go to our website if they want to look at some of the things that we're working on that we think make a difference with regard to jobs and the economy, make a difference with the way that Columbia works, the way it's structured. It's fundamentally flawed in the way it's structured now, and with regard to spending, so we don't get ourselves in the same pickle 10 years down the road. We can't uncreate what was created, but we can avoid it happening again. Those would be 3 really meaningful wins that would make a difference in the kind of South Carolina that my boys are going to grow up in, or y'all's kids, grandkids go down the list.
Will Bobby and Glenn work with you at this stage of the game, or are they too busy trying to find a way for you to get out of Columbia? I mean, can you depend? Can we have a dialogue in Columbia now?
Do you have some friends there?
Yeah,
you still got support.
Not as many as I'd like. but I said to somebody the other day, I said, look, if any of where I've come from was based on a popularity contest in Columbia, I would have been out of office a long time ago. I mean, in other words, I'd be in trouble a long time. I just happened to give them a gun and bullet, the rope, the scaffolding, the whole thing, to some political opponent. But that ain't the way you should arrange the world of politics. I mean, you shouldn't, because a guy falls flat on his face. You shouldn't say, okay, it's payback time, boys, because everything that I pushed was not meant personally. It was meant based on trying to change a system that I desperately think needs changing. And, a guy that originally came to me asking me to run for governor in the first place said, for too long in our state, we've played between the 40-yard line and the 40-yard line, and we are never going to break out as a state. And so at times I've thrown the ball too far. I mean, in other words, we tried to sort of the USC approach to the long ball with Coach Spurrier. I mean, maybe some balls that were too long. But I go back to, I guess, a couple fundamentals. Politicians will follow where the people are at the end of the day. And so do I have some folks that really, really don't like me? Yeah. But at the end of the day, politicians will follow where people are. And I think there's an amazing disconnect. This, again, is part of the reason I'm still here. When I travel around the countryside of South Carolina, what I hear is an amazing capacity for forgiveness and grace, when people say, we don't like what you did, you flat out messed up, but you said you're sorry, and the key to moving on with life is moving on with life, and I want you to make this the most productive last 15 months that you got. Versus, at times, political world and media world, which will still be ginned up in a very different orbit. Absolutely. And so I think that, slowly, though, and there is a disconnect between what I hear from people. And do I have some people that are still very upset and will never forgive me? Absolutely. But the preponderance of folks that I talk to say, you really, really, really disappointed me.
Yep.
But
I think that's what human. We talked about that following morning, that when we were just really disappointed. And the things with the spending and the airplane and all, none of that means anything to me. In fact, it
means a lot to me because it's a redefinition of where I've invested 15 years of my life.
Exactly.
Because we've really worked hard on that stuff. And to say that didn't happen, I mean, 2 wrongs don't make a right in life. In other words, was I wrong on the first thing? Absolutely. Have you, again, people said, quit saying you're sorry. I mean, and move on, and you do your job. And that's what I'm going to go here to meet with the captives, and I'm dropping them at the Port Authority, and, a bunch of different things today.
Well, good.
But I think that you do disappoint people, but that is the reality of being truly human, and I've never before gotten it to the degree that I get it, which causes me to rethink some things on grace and judgment and other things in my own life.
And we want to talk about the fact, an editorial in the paper yesterday here in town talked about you haven't been charged with anything. This whole ethics thing, I mean, we'll talk about that in a second.
Sure.
And it's like, why resign? You haven't been charged with anything.
Right.
We'll talk about that in a minute here on WEZL with Governor Mark Sanford this morning.